In this episode, we talk about how it makes financial sense for you to be more sustainable and help the world.
Absolutely, yeah, and a lot more.
Here with Michaël Wilde.
Bitcoin is the modern version of gold.
Bitcoin is incredibly popular.
People have made fortunes out of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin went through the roof.
You think this is a currency?
Hold on a minute. If you know everything about blockchain and the industries that it's implemented in, which means you do realize that it's not merely Bitcoin and crypto, then this show is not for you. So thank you. Have a good day. However, if you do not know everything about blockchain and those industries, then put your headphones on. My name is Michae, and by no means am I an expert in either blockchain or those industries, but I do interview people who are in this show. Welcome to What the Fork.
Hello everyone, I am honestly delighted to be here with Michaël, and for multiple reasons, but I think just to mention a couple, you really understand the world of the food industry, I would say, and sustainability. but I think what's most important, or just as important, is the way you communicate it, because I think that you communicated it clearly, and that's rather important in that regard, because it allows others to understand it as well. Okay, so tell us just a little bit about yourself, a couple minutes intro.
Yeah, sure, I mean, I'm Michaël Wilde, or Michaël Wilde for the Dutch people. I'm responsible at Eosta for the department which is called Sustainability and Communications. We've joined those two departments together because we see the importance of communicating about the sustainable actions of our growers and not having two separate departments. We see that it strengthens each other. If you communicate strongly about your sustainability actions, you have an immense impact. And it's also something that our audience, the critical consumer, the people who buy organic, they want to hear the efforts and the steps that we're making in the field of sustainability. So this is exactly the message that we are sharing. I think one of the most important things that I've learned, at least, is to be open, honest, and authentic and transparent when we communicate about sustainability issues. And the authenticity is particularly important because we need to share also the fact that we're still not there yet. You know, we're still struggling, but we do have that point on the horizon that we want to achieve. So, you know, we work all together towards that point, and sometimes we fall down, but then we get up again. And people, that's a strong message. It's far a stronger message than to say, look at us, we're perfect, we're the king. So that's...
sharing the struggles as well.
Yeah, sharing the struggles, yeah. And the successes, but also the struggles. Yeah, so it's a great job. I love doing it, and I love Eosta.
You've been at Eosta for?
11 years, yeah. And just maybe, just to explain, Eosta is a supplier of organic fresh fruits and vegetables. For almost 30 years, this is the only thing that we've been doing, is focusing on organic fresh fruits and vegetables. But from the outset, we've been, using that communication as part of what we do. So we don't just sell an organic pineapple from Costa Rica. We also tell the passionate story, the heart of the grower, why he in this case decided to grow organically, how his job is protecting the biodiversity in Costa Rica, how he's contributing to healthy soils, how he's fighting climate change. All very valuable stories. So, what it's all about is that we say, 70% of the value of this pineapple, for example, is just the pineapple, the taste, the quality, that everything is perfect. Yeah. But 30% is the passion, the story, the commitment that's behind that. And that's what we do. We connect the hearts of the grower with the hearts of the consumer.
Can we zoom in a little bit into the business dynamics of Eosta? Yeah. So how do you guys contact the growers? What is the sort of relationships you build, or what is the dynamics there? And just a little bit zooming in.
Yeah, sure. I think it's generally speaking, the world of organic fruits and vegetables is not such a complex, huge world. We know who the players are. We know who the growers are. We have very good relationships, mainly in the countries where we work, which is the Southern Hemisphere countries. That's our particular strength. We have the right connections. We see each other at the large trade fairs. When growers decide to become organic or to start growing organic, they also are looking for partners that can sell their products in a good way in the market. Now, Eosta is one of the main players in the European market when it comes to organic fruits and vegetables. So we find each other, and then basically the relationship, the partnership starts to work. We help the growers in their very difficult period when they go from non-organic to organic agriculture. I think you can almost compare it to a drug addiction. It's very difficult to stop with the drugs. So the drugs for the farmers are the artificial fertilizer and the pesticides, and it's also almost a psychological journey that they have to make to say goodbye to those materials and to let work far more in harmony with nature, to let go the control, to work these kind of things, and we help them with that process as well through compost workshops, advice, sharing knowledge from other growers doing the same crops perhaps in other countries. So we bring them together, and
why would the farmers make that step? Going from non-organic to organic.
It's a good question. Many people automatically assume it's because of financial benefits that they have, because generally speaking, organic farmers earn more money than conventional farmers.
Significantly
and I think
more?
Absolutely, and so that's certainly one of the main reasons. But when I speak to a lot of farmers in this difficult period, and we interview them for the Nature and More website, many of them are also saying they're doing it for their own health benefits, their own health reasons. They don't want to confront their employees with pesticides. They see people dying all around them, very early age, and that's a big reason why growers are also doing it. It's obviously the market, the financial benefits, but it's also the health aspect, and absolutely there's also this feeling that we need to contribute to a better world. They want to be part of the solution. They don't want to be part of the problem. They see the problems just like we all see the problems that the planet is facing, and they want to. They realize that they cannot continue like this. That they're ruining their soils, they're ruining their environment by working so much with these chemicals. So there are numerous reasons, but I think we need to be honest. I mean, financially will be the number one reason, but there's always more reasons than just financial. And generally speaking, when we start working with growers, we look beyond just the financial reason. If it's just a financially motivated reason, then generally speaking, we don't want to work with these growers, because we also see that sometimes, the financial story doesn't work out, and then we need the committed growers to also get through that difficult period. And if you're only financially driven, then you're less motivated to make that through the period than if you're intrinsically motivated through other things, like a commitment to the planet.
I think you pointed out a very interesting point there that I personally didn't know about, but so going into the lives of the farmers, right? Zooming into from their perspective, how often does something like that happen? Like farmers dying or having a lot of health issues due to those pesticides?
Well, it happens quite a lot. I mean, there is estimates from the United Nations that are between 220,000 to 340,000 pesticide deaths every year. And then we need to add about 3 million pesticide illnesses, people actually getting very ill, going to hospital. It's a huge social problem. We speak a lot about the terrible conditions in the clothing sector that has our attention, but in the food sector there's also this types of stuff going on. So I think that also, I get a bit upset when people talk to me about saying, well, organic is not scientifically proven to be healthier than non-organic. I would disagree, but okay, there's people saying that. And then I think, well, maybe that's a discussion for consumers, but it certainly is an issue for the people working on the plantations, because every year hundreds of thousands of people die because they work with these pesticides. So for their health, it certainly does make a difference. And I think we as consumers here in the West, where we have we can afford good products, I think we should at least bear in mind that our impact, what we buy, has a huge impact on other parts of the world and on a lot of people in the world. And if we choose for chemically free products, we are creating a safer environment for those people to earn their living.
So since you know about the farmers and you know about their life and how they go about their life, their business, their decisions, but just to get a better understanding of these people, are they generally do they generally work as farmers because of, let's say, lack of other options of income? Are we talking that they, that there's a whole family that's being sustained by their financial gains through farming, or are they generally well off, or just maybe?
Yeah, I think it's okay, but I think it's important to realize we work with more than 150,000 farmers all over the world. So there's huge discrepancies between some of our mango growers from Burkina Faso who have 3-4 trees and who are working in a cooperative with 3,000 other growers and supplying us, the most amazing, delicious Amelie and Kent mangoes from Burkina Faso. To one of the, probably one of the richest people living in Argentina in the field of agriculture, who's switching his orchards over to organic agriculture and biodynamic agriculture out of a commitment. But this is somebody who has a lot of money and a lot of influence and power. So there's a huge difference in our growers. I think we cannot give them sort of a certain stamp. What we do see, however, is that the common denominator is that they're all committed to farming in a sustainable way. Well, I'm just saying about all the different types of farmers, and there's a huge difference between the whole selection. I just mentioned that, but I think what connects them is the fact that they do want to protect the environment and the soils for future generations, and this is, I think, extremely important because for millions of years we've been farming on this planet, and it's extremely scary to sort of say, well, the buck stops here. Sorry, we just ruined all your soils and we've ruined the biodiversity and we've not made it possible to grow anymore because we thought it'd be a good idea to create a lot of value for shareholders in the short term. Yeah. And I think this is where the problems arise that we are at now, is that we are very much driven short-term monetary gains are at the moment winning the argument as opposed to long-term the stakeholders, the future generations who don't have a voice yet, the vast majority of the population who are trying to make it through the day. So it's a very small group. So I'm not necessarily a complete socialist or whatever, but I think we do need to look at a fair distribution of the way we are looking at finances, at capital, at natural capital. And the good news is that is actually changing through the true cost of food campaigns that we're running. We can talk about that later on.
Before we get into that, because I think you already got into one of the points that I wanted to talk about, which is let's talk about soil for a second, because there is sort of we all kind of know that farmers use all kinds of chemicals and pesticides, and this happens so that they grow more crops and they can sell more, and the crops stay healthy for longer, healthy. But what does actually happen into the soil? Because I don't think that people really know. Maybe not to get too
technical, but I think it's an extremely good question, and it's an extremely important question. And for many people, soil is just something that gets stuck at the bottom of their shoes when they come in, and it's annoying. But I think firstly, let's realize that if we take a handful of soil, there are more than 9 billion organisms, bacteria, animals, life forms in that soil, 9 billion, and that makes the soil healthy. That has so many advantages. It makes it also very nutritious for the plants. It also takes up a lot of CO2, so it helps to fight climate change. That's the whole other great advantage of soil.
So like a whole ecosystem.
It's an ecosystem, and sometimes people say we know more about our solar system than we do about our soil ecosystem. I would love that everybody would be able to put on some special goggles and they would dive into the soil and see what's going on there. Now, what's happening is that the big difference between organic farmers and non-organic farmers is that organic farmers feed the soil. They make sure that the soil stays vibrant. They do that with compost, for example, and the plant then can decide itself what it takes up from that soil. If there's so much to choose from, it's better that we let nature decide what's best. The conventional agriculture has another attitude. They say we need to feed the plant, and it's almost like they think, okay, the plant needs nitrogen, potassium, whatever, this and this. So let's give that to the plant, and then the plant can take that up. And that's another philosophy. But that's okay. It's fair enough to have a different philosophy, but the detrimental effects of these artificial fertilizers, these are mainly salts, minerals, and if you put minerals and salts in a living environment, the living environment dies. This is also, in the Dutch, we did a lot of in the period of the VOC time, we transported a lot of fruits to other continents, and we kept the fruits safe, or didn't want them to deteriorate, by adding salt to them.
Okay.
And the salt killed the bacteria and the life, and therefore people could still eat the oranges and the lemons later on.
Yeah.
Now that was fine then to protect the food, but if you put the salt in the soil, you can imagine that those bacteria also die, and so you're killing the soil. That's one big disadvantage.
So you're essentially destroying that ecosystem.
Exactly. And this is something that we've only been doing recently. I mean, artificial fertilizers have only been around since the start of the last century, around about the Second World War, the First World War, Second World War, that sort of developed. And when the wars were finished, there was a big drama here in Europe, obviously, that we never wanted to have another hunger period in Europe, and so this was seen as the big solutions to all our problems, the artificial fertilizers and the chemicals, and man was going to now take control. Yeah. And what we're now realizing is that it did bring a lot of prosperity to Europe, but it also caused an immense amount of issues. I mean, the production of artificial fertilizers causes the second largest amount of CO2 emissions in agriculture, and that's after methane produced by cows through the burps and the farts of cows. So it's very negative. It's causing huge dead zones in the oceans, in the Baltic Sea, in the Gulf of Mexico, in the area between Korea and China. There's whole dead zones because the artificial fertilizers are running off into the streams and into the oceans. There the algae are feeding off it, and then when the algae die, the bacteria take over and they take up all the oxygen to consume those algae, and then there's no more oxygen left in that area. So there's huge detrimental effects. That's what it comes down. But back to soil.
That's completely fine. But can we just name these harmful effects? Like, first and foremost, by killing the ecosystem, are we making? What happens to that soil after 10 years?
This is a very good point. Firstly, you see that the soil becomes less productive, and one of the main arguments why people are, let's say, are against organic agriculture, they say yes, but organic cannot feed the world. This is often used argument, and that's based upon the fact that when you look at the production statistics, that indeed organic has less productivity compared to non-organic products. It's about 18%. 18, yeah. Okay. But what people forget is that they are looking at it with their 2019 goggles and not with their 2030 goggles. Because if we look at the same piece of land in 10, 15 years' time, the production levels will be far lower than the organic level because the soil is dying through all these minerals that we're adding to the so the productivity of the soil diminishes over a longer period.
Can you still pump that productivity up with more pesticides?
This is the problem, because what you're doing is you're actually allowing plants to grow faster than they should. Organic is looking far more in harmony with nature, so the pineapple grows in a natural way. Therefore, the pineapple is a much stronger, more vibrant product. If you pump something up, it's far more susceptible to disease. So, if you compare it to yourself, if you eat healthily, you do some sports, you go out, but you also relax and you meditate, and also you have a fine balance, then you're far less likely to be sick. However, if you are lying in a hospital and you're using an infuse and people are just feeding you, when a bacteria comes along, you're going to get ill. Okay. Because you don't have that strong, system around you to protect you. And it's exactly the same with organic agriculture. We are creating, or the farmers are creating, a natural, strong, vibrant ecosystem so that when a disease or a pest comes along, that these plants are very much in a position to have a strong position. And sometimes, there are situations, but most of the time they can handle it. Whereas in conventional, you need to constantly treat it like a patient in a hospital who's on a drip feed, and you need to take all kinds of precautions to make sure that patient doesn't get sicker. Yeah. And that's why there's so many more pesticides, unnecessary pesticides as far as I'm concerned, being used in conventional agriculture, because we're not creating the right harmony between the plant and the ecosystem.
And that long term will only simply backfire.
Sure, it's already backfiring now. I mean, we have huge ecosystem problems in central France where there's no more birds living because all the insects are gone. We have huge problems. Well, we were going back to the problems of artificial fertilizer. We were talking about the fact that soil is being ruined. We're seeing that sea ecosystems are being ruined. We're seeing that it's a huge producer of CO2, so it's having a negative impact on climate change. Whereas these healthy soils are taking up CO2. You know, it's not just that you're sort of saying there's a hole in the boat and we're fixing we're throwing out the water. We're actually fixing the boat by having fixing the hole by having healthy soil. So, you know, on all fronts, when we look at the large sustainability issues that we are facing as a global community, we see that sustainable agriculture is part of the solution, and large-scale chemical agriculture is part of the problem. And we are now at a situation where either you are part of the problem or you're part of the solution. There's no more sitting on the fence or saying, oh, okay, I'm neutral. No more neutral. If you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And that's where we're set now. And so I'm extremely optimistic in that regard with seeing the developments that sustainable agriculture will make in the coming years, because even governments are now, and United Nations are seeing the huge advantages that organic agriculture or sustainable agricultural practices have for this planet. So it's good.
It should be happy.
Yeah.
So now we've been talking about what's going on in the macro, right, as a whole.
Yes.
I am very interested in discussing a little bit something we talked about briefly, which is consumers, right, and consumer behavior. So there's people are, perhaps you could say, biologically incapable of seeing the bigger picture, like we discussed earlier, because this is the space that we see, touch, and feel. That we only have this limited experience in this very small sort of this very small area, right?
Yeah.
So me as a consumer, if I'm going to the supermarket and I can make the decision between buying something organic and non-organic, and we're talking a 20-30 cent price difference. I'm not really sure, and doing that consistently, it's very difficult for me to see that kind of picture, right?
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, how is it even? Can you even blame the consumers for that, or is it even possible to educate the consumers more on that?
I think so. I think I didn't grow up in Holland, nor did you, but I know there was a few years ago, or many years ago, there was, and the Dutch people watching this will understand, it's called the Henny Huisman Sound Mix Show. And so it's about Dutch people looking like you and me, and they go through a little portal, and they go in, and when they come out, they are like Tina Turner, or they are like George Michael, and they walk in, and they come out, and they're within a millisecond they turn into something completely different, and they sing, and it was like before The Voice, or all these shows on music shows, and obviously, when they made this TV program, there were probably 3-4 hours that this person was going to get all, with the makeup and the wigs and the costume. But when you watch the show, they went in and out. And these little portals have appeared in all the supermarkets in Europe and elsewhere. And what's happening is we're not turning from you or me into George Michael, but we are turning from a concerned citizen outside the supermarket who really cares about our planet into a consumer. And we're talking, it's a completely different entity. And this is, I think, a fascinating thing that's happening, because when we walk out, we suddenly become concerned about our planet and concerned about the future of our children, etc. But when we're in the supermarket, we suddenly have forgotten that. We're like a new, different person. It's like these magic ports that we go through, these magic doors at every supermarket. And that's something that I find absolutely fascinating, what's happening. Because when you speak, when I interview you here, everybody is concerned about this and really wants to commit to a better planet. But when you're in the store, you buy the cheap shit, which is having a detrimental effect. So,
does that come down to? Sorry to interrupt you, but does that come down to the retailers and their marketing efforts?
I think it has many reasons. I think the retailers. It has the fact that we are very much a consumer is very much driven by convenience and particularly about very low prices. So they think yes, yes, yes at that moment. And I think the way to solve that is to confront the concerned citizen within the consumer. So, for example, in Sweden, there's a nice little example. The supermarket owner, he had his bananas, his organic bananas, for, I don't know, let's say €2.49 a kilo. And he had his conventional bananas, which were like €1.50 or €1. But he didn't write conventional bananas, he wrote sprayed bananas. And then suddenly people see, okay, this is wait a minute, the cheap stuff is sprayed, and wait, I'm not actually for spraying. I don't really like the pesticide. And you saw that this guy sold much more organic bananas. Another thing, an example in Denmark is somebody put the organic grapes were at the fruits and vegetable section, but the conventional grapes he'd placed next to the cleaning agents.
Okay.
The Ajax and all the cleaning shit and so any little sign, if you're looking for chemical-free grapes, then there you'll find them at the product aisle. Or for eggs, they had the organic eggs, and for the conventional the eggs, they placed a little shopping trolley, and they said, by all means buy these cheap eggs, but please realize that the chickens had just as much room as if you were now to jump into this shopping trolley. And that way you are confronting the concerned citizen within the supermarket, and that's what we need to do. We need to far more reach out to that concerned citizen that is inside of all of us, but reach him in the supermarket and not just outside the supermarket. Because outside the supermarket it's easy. Everybody's going, yes, I care about my planet and I care about my children, but it's their behavior that is having an impact. Every time you enter a store, you cast a vote for the world you want, but too many people are just sort of outside the store, they're casting their vote, and they say, okay, now I'm going to and then they go in and they buy the cheap stuff. And basically they're saying, I agree with the situation that it is now, and that's not a good thing. So that's what I think needs to happen. And retail needs to take action and offer also much more healthier, sustainable products. And maybe we need more taxation on the cheap stuff, because we pay almost, if you realistically look at it, we pay 4 times for cheap food. Once in the supermarket, once with our health costs, once with our environment costs, and once with our social costs. But we don't realize that.
Since you just mentioned it, let's get into that, because I think it's absolutely one of the coolest concepts in this whole field, right? The actual profit and loss balance sheet, calculating the hidden costs of every product. Can you just tell me what that is?
I think it's important. When we buy anything, whether it's this pineapple or anything else, there you have visible costs and you have invisible costs. However, these are very realistic costs, but they are invisible. So, for example, let's just talk about water. I think
these are costs for who?
For the society.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, those costs have to be paid by you either as a consumer or as a taxpayer. Okay. Because the government doesn't sort of create, well, it sometimes create money, but generally speaking, the taxpayer is. So let's just talk about water. If you have orange production in Spain, conventional oranges, chemicals are being used. Those chemicals not only stick to the tree and killing the insects, but they also go into the water system, where they also have a very detrimental effect. But that water system has to be then cleaned in order for us to have drinking water or for other uses. Those cleaning costs are immense. I mean, the French government calculated that it would cost them €522 billion.
522 billion?
Billion, it's more than we gave to Greece. Billion euro to clean the whole water supply of artificial chemicals and fertilizers. So these are huge costs, and these costs are then paid for, in this case, by the Spanish government or the French government. But they need to get that money, so it comes in from the taxes. So that's just an environmental cost. But we're not even talking about health costs. I mean, this professor at the University in Amsterdam calculated that the real price of a Big Mac, if you just look at health costs, should be €198 for a Big Mac.
198
euro, If you then calculate all the costs that we as society, we as the Dutch health system need to treat people with obesity, diabetes, which this fast food is symbolic for. So these are these hidden costs. When we buy the Big Mac, we just see that we're paying, €3.40 for a Big Mac. That's what we see. but the actual cost that Big Mac has for us, for you, for me, for taxpayers, for other people in other parts of the world, is far higher. And the project that we're involved in with the true cost of food is that we at least want to start bringing out those hidden costs and making them more visible and showing what these costs are. And then the interesting part of that is that when you see that sustainably farmed products have a far lower, they also have hidden costs, let's be honest, we know an organic pineapple also has hidden costs, but these costs are far less compared to the conventional alternative. And this for me is incredibly exciting and interesting, because whereas, maybe 20-25% of the people who are ideologically motivated, you and I really want to make the world a better place, and we're willing to make a commitment. But the large majority, 75-80% of the people out there, are motivated more by money, and if things cost, so convenience and etc. So, but when you make sustainability financial and you show that the sustainable alternative is also, financially speaking, the more interesting alternative. It costs society less if we farm in more in harmony with nature. Then you're really helping to make changes. Then you're seeing that governments are saying, whoa, the French government, 522 billion, that's actually quite a lot of money. Yeah. Maybe we as a French government should stimulate more natural farming practices where we don't get this pollution, because at the end of the day, and how can we stimulate those farming practices? By either using the carrot or the stick. So we can either give subsidies to farmers to switch to more organic practices, but we can also raise taxes on artificial fertilizers and on chemicals. And everybody sort of agrees, because yes, it would be very strange that other people should pay for the pollution that these large agrochemical companies are causing. Yeah. So you're also not finding many people who are against this development. There's hardly anybody against honest calculations. So it's actually quite a good argument, quite an easy argument, just to make sustainability financial, to really push the sustainability agenda. You're taking it away out of the ideology, which is also can be very confrontational. You're either left or right. You're Donald Trump, Democrat, Republican. Exactly. Blah blah blah. And now you say, well, okay, if we're going to be calculating in an honest financial way, I think nobody can be against that. So I'm optimistic about that, and that's a bigger movement than just governments are increasing taxation or giving subsidies to good practices. It also, we're seeing pension funds, large investment companies are saying, well, we need to invest in companies that have a good story when it comes to the environment and the climate and the water system, because those companies will have a far bigger chance of surviving than the companies that are currently being polluting, because they're seeing already that governments will be penalizing them and their profitability will come down. So the profit and loss account of companies will look very different in the next, let's say, 5-6 years' time.
I was just going to ask you about that. Like, are governments having this discussion?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's happening as we speak here in Holland. It's happening in Sweden, where they increased taxation on artificial fertilizers to 20%, and where they're investing the added the income into sustainable farming practices. We see it in France, where Macron introduced high taxes on agrochemicals, herbicides particularly. Okay. The German government is looking at a new taxation model. So this is happening as we speak. But also the accountancy companies are working on this. PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, PwC, Deloitte. All of them are looking at a new way of giving value to companies. And they're not just looking at the financial profit and loss, but they're also looking at what is your impact on natural capital, on the environment, and what is your impact on social capital. If you train people, if you offer education, you're adding value. If you're planting forests and you're taking care of the soil and the water, you're adding value. So it's not just a negative, it's not just a cost. You can also contribute, and that also comes back on your balance sheet. And the companies with a good story, they are far more interesting to invest your money in. So at a certain stage, the large polluters will no longer be interesting for investments, and that is a good thing.
I think the most positive thing out of that is the fact that it is already happening, and these discussions are already happening, and small steps perhaps, maybe even bigger than just small, are already happening. So you kind of addressed somewhat a common opinion when I was researching online and when I spoke to someone, which is, well, there's a couple of them, right? One of them is there enough food for everyone if you grow it in an organic way? But I actually take it back. I'm not going to.
No. But I want to quickly just make one point on that, because it's an important one, and I think people watching this will want that question answered.
Okay, let's address it.
So let's address it. We talked about the soil and the fact that the quality of the soil diminishes, and therefore your production on that piece of land diminishes. So conventional agriculture is certainly not the answer when we look at it, even though there's 18% higher production now. In 10, 15 years' time on that same piece of land, you're far below your organic, because the organic stays at the same level because they're feeding the soil. But the most important thing is that we need to change our diet. We need to get away from eating animals to a far more plant-based diet. If you look at agricultural land, just for example in the United States, 75% of the land is being used to grow feed for animals or fuel, like for 75%. So before we start talking about organic feeding the world or not, we need to talk about that. How are we going to use our available agricultural land, and let's use it as efficiently as possible to grow plants that we actually can eat, so that you have a huge amount. We need to talk about distribution. I mean, we are now able to grow enough food to feed 11 billion people. We're only 9 billion on the planet, but we're already growing enough food for 11 billion, except we're throwing it away because we don't have good distribution systems. And a third issue is food waste. A third of our food is thrown away, it's lost. So, by that we clean that argument about organic feeding the world. Sure, I'm convinced that we can, and I think it doesn't necessarily all have to be organically certified, but I think we can. But the most important thing is to address our diets. So we need to eat less meat, because it's good for our health, but it's extremely good for the environment. And we need to look at distribution of our food. And there's more people dying of obesity and diet-related diseases than of hunger. So there's something going on there, which is not really correct. And the third thing, we need to throw away less of our food. So if we address those three issues, then we can easily feed the world in a sustainable manner.
Yeah, I mean, even mathematically it does play out, because even if it's 18% less organically, right, but 1/3 of it is already being thrown away, like balancing those out, and you can feed 11 billion people. But remember that 18% is that with the 2019 glasses. Yeah. And whereas when we're having this issue in the future, that productivity will have gone down far less. And that's the mistake we're making. Policymakers are only looking at the world from the perspective now and thinking that same perspective will still be there in 10, 15 years' time. Whereas at that level, that piece of land that we just analyzed before, the organic will be far higher than the conventional, because the soil will be destroyed, and you'll need to throw in a lot more extra artificial fertilizer if you're ever going to be able to produce something on that piece of land. But then at some point, it's inevitable for the soil to be so little productive that
the people stop, and then they go and cut down new rainforests to start again. And this is the thing. So we really need to radically change our farming systems.
So I want to talk about this other opinion that's, I don't exactly know how popular it is, but tell me if it's fact or myth. There are people who believe that when it comes to climate change, it's already too late, and there's a couple parts to this, right? One of them being that it's just the earth is already so polluted that there's no going back. That's the first part. Or the second part is it's still not as polluted as you cannot go back, but the systems in place which pollute the world are, we're talking the transportation of food, the production of food, and everything. Airplanes. So, and because of those systems, and because the world is not willing to just completely change those systems, because it's also pretty impossible, that will cause the pollution necessary to not be able to go back. And this is a little bit of a negative note, but I think it's an important.
I understand this worry, and I understand also that there are significant numbers of people actually saying, it's too late. So, and when I look at the amount of change that we're seeing and the amount of change that's necessary, I would almost agree. However, I have two daughters, Nienke, who's 14, and Laura, who's 11. turning 12 in a few weeks' time. I think that, even though, let's just imagine that this dark black scenario is heading at us, it's too late.
Yeah.
At least that we want to go down fighting. If the consequences now of us, all of us, the whole global population accepting it's too late, that would drive us into anarchy. It would make the world horrible, even more horrible now than what's happening coming at us anyway. So I think we need to fight hard and radically and change people's opinion and fight for this better world, because it motivates others to come in place and maybe make the changes that we currently do not know that there are there, so that we can save the planet and we can develop technology that perhaps can take up a lot of CO2, or that, despite the fact that the polar caps are melting, we'll still be able to create some form of civilization that is still a positive impact and that can ride the tide. So it's not just avoiding climate change, we're fully in it, but it's also in our case with agriculture, climate smart agriculture. How can you address food production to the new issues? And also again there you see that organic has a much stronger and better story than conventional. So I'm optimistic. I think even though this is happening, and even though maybe we cannot turn things back, we need to continue to stay positive, because when we start being negative, nothing's going to come. Yeah. There's no more energy and willingness to do. Then we're just sort of lying back with our little white flags and saying, we surrender. Yeah. That's not going to get us anywhere. We need to motivate a large group, particularly of young people, who have the energy to really make a difference. And if we as Eosta can contribute in a very small way to that large movement, that's happening, but not fast enough, okay? Yeah. Let's do that and go down fighting if necessary. Yeah. But I need to look my children in the eye when I'm passing away and say, I did everything what I could, and that's important for me.
Beautiful words.
Yeah, no, but it's essential. Yeah, it's sad, but but I don't like to look at it that way. Let's sort of go for the scenario that we can still do something.
Yeah, the scenario was we're already gaining some sort of momentum, and then the more momentum we gain, then the faster we go. So that could be it. Sure,
let's snowball it.
There's one thing that we didn't talk about yet, which I would at least like to touch on before we finish this interview, and blockchain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great stuff. Very important. Yeah.
Based on what you already know about blockchain, how can you see it fitting into this whole scenario? Or
I mean, let's be clear. I'm not an expert in the field of blockchain, but from what I understand about blockchain, it's about being very transparent as to what's happening throughout the supply chain. Yeah. And as far as we are concerned, there is no sustainability without transparency. So I generally feel in what blockchain is offering in the field of transparency, it's going to contribute immensely to more sustainable supply chains, in our case, in the food production industry. And also when we look at the true cost accounting, what we've done, we've calculated these hidden costs. If we can bring that also into the blockchain, then you make things visible. You're taking that, these hidden costs. You're making them the very real costs. So I'm very optimistic and positive about the developments that are going on in blockchain, because I think they can genuinely contribute to a more sustainable food systems. Obviously, every company, every supply chain is different, and every actors are different, and it can be quite complex. But I think the general feeling is that when we make things transparent, it's making it far easier to not to do the bad stuff, and it makes it easier to do the good stuff.
Perhaps not to waste food.
For example, not to waste food, but for example, using illegal pesticides, chemicals, that is controlled. There's a lot of that happening now. Just that, European Union or other governments are saying you're not allowed to use this material because it's very bad for the environment. Those materials are still being used. Those kind of stuff would be far more easier to detect within the blockchain, because it's a full transparent model. The effects of these materials, the food waste issue that you mentioned is a very, very good one. Your quality of your soil, if you see the soil quality becoming less and less, maybe you should become concerned, because your land is also worth less. Your children will not inherit a rich piece of farmland that perhaps you would want them to inherit. That would motivate you perhaps to say goodbye to the artificial fertilizers and look more towards compost and natural ways of feeding your soil. So in all aspects, I think the blockchain would work. My advice would be, to be able to make the translation into more of a practical thing. For many farmers, blockchain is a big theme that people talk about online and at large congresses, and only something for the large multinationals and the very complex agro-food companies. But I think it's important that we also translate that more into a very practical, simple farmer method, that they see the benefits and not just the complexity of blockchain, which I sometimes think. So,
Absolute pleasure
Yeah.
having you on the show.
Well, thanks very much.
Definitely.
It's been great. Thank you very much.